Right. Worked. Yes. All right. So again, my name is Amy Phillips. I'm the DuPage County Programs Director for the Conservation Foundation. For those of you that are just getting to know us, we are a nonprofit organization proud to be accredited by the Land Trust Accreditation Commission. And our mission is to improve the health of our communities. And we do this by preserving and restoring natural areas and open space, protecting rivers and watersheds, and promoting stewardship of the environment. We'd like to thank DuPage County Stormwater Management for sponsoring this webinar. For over 20 years, they have been a really important partner of ours in reaching the public with the message of action residents can take to protect the water quality in DuPage County. Sponsors like DuPage County help to keep these webinars free for everyone, so please contact us if you want information on being a sponsor. And I'm going to post contact information and all sorts of links as Jennifer's talking in the presentation. All right, so just a couple of things just upcoming. One of our participants said that they had heard Jennifer speak at the Chloride Watchers. We do have one more virtual training on December 6th. So if Jennifer's going to talk about what Chloride Watchers is, it's a really important community science project. But basically you collect water samples and gather data and help to kind of track where the salt is. So the last training is going to be on December 6th, and I'll put the registration in the chat if you're interested in that. The Conservation Foundation has a DuPage Environmental Summit, which is going to be on the topic of agroecology and community-centered agriculture. That's going to be virtual in the morning on January 18th. So I will also post the information in the chat. That is also free. For those of you that are familiar with our Green Earth Harvest, it's an all organic farming operation. And we have our next season, believe it or not, the shares are going on sale on December 1st. So on Friday, that's when the shares are going on sale. So I'm going to post all of these in the chat. But just to get started, we want to go ahead and start to introduce our speaker and our topic. So again, the topic is being salt smart at home. So winters here in Northeastern Illinois bring a challenge of dealing with snow and ice, which generally means using salt. And while we need to keep everyone safe, salt is damaging to both our natural and built environments. Excess salt damages buildings and vehicles, harms our pets and plants, and degrades our rivers, wetlands, and groundwater. So the Salt Smart Collaborative is helping to support communities using best winter practices while keeping you safe. So Jennifer Hammer from the Conservation Foundation, she's our Director of Watershed Programs, and she has been with us for over 25 years leading these watershed programs. She serves as the lead technical staff for the Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition and the Lower DuPage Watershed Group. And she also coordinates the Salt Smart Collaborative. Jennifer says she's an ecologist at heart, usually carrying a pair of binoculars to look at birds, plants, dragonflies, and all manners of herps with her husband, Ed. So with that, I will turn it over to Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you all for joining us this evening. So we're going to kind of jump in. And so actually, Amy actually read through our mission, so we kind of get a little bit of an idea about the work that we do here at the Conservation Foundation, and really kind of lumps down into kind of 4 buckets. So we work a lot on land preservation and restoration, cleaning and restoring our rivers and streams. It's a lot of the work that I'm focused on, environmental education, and then we also grow healthy organic produce at our McDonald farm in Naperville. We work mostly in DuPage, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. That's kind of our primary core county area, but we also do bits of work in Cook, DeKalb, LaSalle, Grundy, and Grundy counties. And we're headquartered at the McDonald farm, really right at the Will County, DuPage County line. So jumping into the Salt Smart program. So the Salt Smart Collaborative is coordinated by the Conservation Foundation. That's part of the work that Hannah Miller at the foundation and I do. And it really is meant to be a clearinghouse of information and resources for all kinds of people. So whether it's residents, municipalities, contractors, we have lots of resources available and really pulling together the good work that's being done across our region. And trying to provide examples as to how these different practices can be implemented, how we can communicate better, how we can learn from each other. So looking at trainings, for municipal staff. We developed the training for private contractors. We're working with property managers. So really trying to come at the chloride issue from lots of different directions. So before we get too far into this, really kind of thinking about what chlorides are. And so there are kind of all of these different terms that are associated with winter de-icing. And the most common form of de-icer that's used out there is sodium chloride, rock salt, road salt, dry salt. They're all kind of the same terms. It's the same salt that's on your table. That's your table salt. It's just more refined and clean. But it's the same, has the same properties, sodium chloride. And when we talk about brine, which we're going to talk a fair amount about later, it's really just a mixture of salt and water. And so a straight brine is just salt and water. There are different mixes that can be used for different weather conditions. But when we talk about brine, it's generally just salt and water. De-icer really being kind of just a very general term because there are products that don't contain chlorides that work as de-icers. So de-icers is really the broad term for anything that melts ice. And some of the other forms of chloride that is used in winter de-icing are some different forms of like magnesium chloride, calcium chloride, and potassium chloride. Generally speaking, these would be something that might be mixed with your rock salt, with your sodium chloride to help make it work better at colder temperatures. But there's kind of lots of terms, but are all fairly similar. So we're going to kind of start out with the idea of safety versus the environment. I like to start a lot of the presentations I do kind of really talking about that safety issue. So we're not asking people to not use salt. We're not asking them to, not be safe out there. It's just, when you're looking at some of these pictures, I have lots and lots of pictures like this. I get staff and friends that send me pictures. I stop. My daughter hates walking with me in the winter because I stop and take pictures like this. But we waste a whole lot of salt. And all of that wasted salt ends up down our storm drains and into our local rivers and streams. So there's a whole lot that we can do while keeping people safe, whether it's while they're driving their cars or walking into the grocery store. We can do that with a whole lot less salt. And when you look at particularly the picture that's on the right side of your screen, you can kind of tell that the sun is out. So the pavement is dry, the sun is out. All of that is really just wasted salt. It's not doing anything other than creating really a safety hazard in and of itself, kind of like walking on marbles. But it's not doing anything for safety as relating to ice. It's having that dry material on the pavement when it's dry and sunny out. It's really, that's a form of waste that we're really trying to reduce. So through different best management practices, we like to call them salt smart practices. So incorporating different types of equipment, different types of products, using the right amount of products. It allows us to waste a lot less salt. It allows us to not only maintain the expected levels of safety, but in some cases, we're able to get to that level of safety faster. We're proactive, we can save money, we can save time. And some of that, when you think about time, and you think about, when we do have a snowstorm, the amount of time that public works folks are in their plow trucks. If we can be more proactive and give them a little head start to help reduce the amount of time they're in those trucks, or give them more time in between their routes, that can go a long way, not just for saving money, but also make it a little easier on the workforce. So there's lots of different things that we can do to be able to both be safe and protect the environment. As we think about, where sources of chlorides are coming from within the kind of snow belt, anywhere where it snows during the winter, road salt is the #1 source, the biggest source of salt. As I was going through my presentation yesterday, just kind of updating some things, and it's like every year there's new articles out there about the earth getting saltier, water getting saltier. And this was an article from the Washington Post at the end of October. And again, doing this work, I get people sharing stuff like this with me all the time, so it's always fun to kind of have a catalog of things I change out, keep updated. But this whole article about the use of salt and what it's doing to our environment. As you get out of areas, so as you move away from the more densely populated or high road density areas and getting out more, and also in our area specifically, because many of us are on Lake Michigan water, we're not using a water softener. But as you get away from Lake Michigan water being your water source, and as you get into areas that might be less urban, then things like water softeners are going to be a source of chlorides as well as fertilizers. So one of the chlorides that I mentioned earlier, the potassium chloride, that is a component of fertilizer, getting the potassium out onto the crops, but that comes along with some chloride. And then dust suppressants are also a source. But when you look at it, and I believe this number is actually a couple years old now, but more than 48 billion pounds of road salt a year that's spread here in the United States. That's a heck of a lot of salt. So kind of thinking about, okay, so what? We need to have safe surfaces, so we need to use salt. There's nothing we can do about it. And why should we care anyway? So we know from data that we've collected here in the region that there are impacts, and I'll talk about that, I think, actually on the next slide. But it takes very little water or very little salt to pollute water permanently. So a teaspoon of salt contaminating 5 gallons of water. When you think about, most bags of salt you buy are going to be between 20 and 40 pounds of salt. Maybe a 50-pound bag, depending on how they're sold, but usually they're more in that 20 to 40 pounds, really easy enough to pick up. But like the snow truck, the plow trucks, they literally have tons of salt in those trucks every time they come out. And a ton of salt will contaminate, it's like an Olympic-sized swimming pool worth of water. And that doesn't go away. It's the thing that makes salt work really well as a deicer is it dissolves in the water really easily, but it's also what makes it a big impact on our waters. So it doesn't go away out of our water in our, mostly we're talking about our streams here in our region. So it's flowing downstream to be somebody else's problem, but it doesn't actually come out of the water. And then particularly when you're looking at lakes and ponds and wetlands, that salt really doesn't go away. It just settles in. So again, mentioned like we have working with the watershed groups here in our region, and in this case, the DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group, which is very active here in DuPage County. They've been collecting chloride data for years at sites in this case, this one's on Salt Creek, but on the East Branch, on the West Branch, so on the kind of the larger rivers, and really tracking what those chloride levels are. And we can see in the wintertime, we definitely go above state standards, but from the data that we have collected, we know that we see impacts on fish and bugs at much, much lower levels than what the state water quality standard is. And when it's really the most important time is in the spring, when the fish are laying their eggs or they have young of the year. And you might think, well, we don't put salt down in the spring. We're all done with that. The problem is with all of that waste, when there's salt that's ends up in the curbs and ends up down in the storm sewers or in the ditches, it keeps washing down into our streams every time it rains in the spring. So it really takes a long time for all of that to wash off of our landscape. And that's the time when it's most critical for fish and bugs, is in that spring kind of runoff period. It's beyond aquatic life. So like I said, fish and bugs, but other things that live in our rivers, like our freshwater mussels. Chlorides have a big impact in the reproductive cycle. Things like amphibians, like salamanders and frogs, that really essentially kind of breathe through their skin, things that absorb through their skin very easily. And so when they come in contact with salt, like if they're in, crossing a parking lot from in the spring, trying to get to, from one area to another area to get to a breeding pond or something like that, and they come in contact with salt, it literally just dries them out from the outside in. This does a lot of damage to our vegetation, and whether that's our sod or natural vegetation, changes the composition of our soil, making it more difficult for things to grow in the soil. And then it really favors things like giant reed and crabgrass, some of these plants that like to grow in salty areas. And so when you have those higher content levels in the soil, it actually helps to accelerate the growth of these weeds. And then from a drinking water perspective, so again, more as you get out of DuPage County, we are seeing increasing amounts of chlorides in our groundwater wells and our drinking water wells. So beyond our natural environment, which I mean, honestly, it's the reason why I'm passionate about working on this and have been working on this topic for the last 15 years. It's looking at the other damages that chlorides cause during the winter time is really kind of a key way to help reach other folks who maybe have some different priorities or really kind of driven by bottom line, what things cost. And when you start incorporating in how much it costs to replace the infrastructure that chloride damages, so anything that's concrete, anything that has steel in it, your sidewalks, building faces, awning supports, handrails, light posts, garbage cans, anything with metal, in addition to things, like we normally would think of like your vehicles. There's a lot of damage to property from the excessive use of chlorides. And so that is really kind of when we really think about salt, it's not just the cost of how much did that bag of salt cost, or how much did, a municipality pay per ton of salt and pay the person to drive the truck and put it down. And that's just the base cost. When you start thinking about what does it cost to fix the infrastructure, what does it cost to replace your vegetation, the damage that it does to the environment, the harm that it does to the pets, and you start putting all of that together, and the cost it explodes to something like, for every ton of salt, which is generally speaking about $150 to buy that ton of salt, you're looking at over $17,000 worth of damage, I believe, for like every ton of salt. So, and there's kind of a range in there, but it is a huge cost of damage for every ton of salt that we're putting down. So anything we can do, whether it's through our communities or us as residents, to help make reductions, it all will make a difference. So we've done a lot of work with communities, and so kind of talking about the different salt smart practices, and there's lots of different things, and whether it's, the equipment that they're using, the training that they're doing, how they're documenting their salt usage, how they're storing their salt, how they're making sure that their equipment is functioning properly so that they're using the right amount of salt for the weather conditions, that they're actually varying how they apply salt and how much they're applying based on weather conditions, that it isn't, the same amount of salt all the time, because of the weather conditions, the pavement temperature makes a big difference as to how much is really needed. So there's lots of different practices. So one of the ones that I think people are definitely seeing more and more is the anti-icing, or the stripes out on the road. So using brine and using liquids is one of the best ways that we can make reductions in our salt usage. When you look at like a gallon of brine, which is about 2.3 pounds of salt, will cover the same amount of salt as if you read the directions on a 20-pound bag of salt. If you do the math, we have a bag sitting in our office, and it's for 1,000 square feet, they would recommend you use 27 pounds of salt. But with using brine, you can get that same 1,000 square feet covered with a gallon of brine, 2.3 pounds. So the liquids, using brine is a big important way to help us make reductions. And it is something that people see out on the road when you see those stripes. We're starting to see them in parking lots and on sidewalks because they work just as well. And it helps to stop the bond from forming between the ice and the pavement. So when you come by with your plow or your shovel, it's going to come up much easier. So you see you see trucks putting it down. They can put it down before the storm event, be proactive. Another way you use liquids is actually to wet the salt as it's coming out of the truck. And then that helps that salt forming that brine quicker, working quicker, and we can use less. We're really trying to encourage our communities, our municipalities to communicate with residents. I think the more that they can communicate with residents about the plan that they have, because every community has a snow and ice plan. It's a really complicated process to deal with winter storms, but they have a plan that helps them, know how to make decisions, based on weather and, where they should be plowing first and what equipment should be used. So those plans are really important. And I think the more that we can communicate and let folks know what's going on, it's just to help keep people safe and understand what practices are being used and why. So kind of really more of the meat of what we're talking about today is how you can do some of these things at home. And some of those things really start before the winter and looking at drainage areas, on your property and to figure out if there are some things that you can do to help reduce or minimize where ice might be forming. One of the biggest contributors to ice on our home pavements at home is downspouts. And so when you have a downspout going across a sidewalk or a driveway, that is going to cause problems throughout the entire winter. And so if there's any ways to redirect a downspout, that's definitely something during the summer. If they can do that, that's going to help you out during the winter. If there is an opportunity to, fix drainage issues during the winter, or during the summertime, that's going to help out during the winter. And thinking about having the right tool for the job, pretty much anything you do, having the right tool is going to make it easier. And so, whether you having a shovel, having a good stiff broom for those light fluffy snows, having a good ice scraper to help break up that ice first, or, if you put down a little bit of salt, it'll help to just make cracks in the ice and then use that scraper to get it off so that you're not having to use as much. So really those mechanical means are going to be really important way to help us use less salt. And I mentioned the brine, and so brine is actually really quite easy to make at home. And I know Amy was going to be putting some links in, and so at saltsmart.org we have lots of resources, and there's an outreach tab that you can hit, and it has several different videos, but one of them being how to make brine at home. It's a really fairly simple process of weighing out some salt and mixing it with warm water, letting it cool, kind of letting all the impurities settle to the bottom because there's usually some gravel or something in it, and then using whether like a garden sprayer, pump sprayer. There's several different ways that you can apply it, but you can use brine at home to help that ice or help snow and ice from sticking to your pavement and making it easier to get off. And when you have like a light fluffy snow, because that brine is already there, most of the time it'll help to melt that snow without even having to do any kind of shoveling. So again, clearing as much snow as possible. And most people are well aware of, like, if you can get your snow shoveling done before you back your car out or walk across the snow, it's going to make it easier to, get all the snow up and not have icy patches. But, it's not always possible to get that done before you have to leave for work. But the more snow you can get off with your shovel or your snow blower, the better, because you're going to be able to use less salt. And then thinking about where we're applying salt, because it doesn't necessarily have to be everywhere. Particularly if you have a relatively flat driveway where you're not worried about some driveways that have an angle on them that you're not going to be able to get up the driveway if it's icy, then you need to probably utilize a little bit more salt if you have ice. If you have a relatively flat driveway, really focusing on using salt where you're actually walking. And then think about those places maybe that you don't use. So in this picture here, thinking about, a sidewalk maybe that just goes around to the backyard. And if that's not something you use during the winter, there's no reason to put salt down on it. But making sure that you use salt where you need it, but then also thinking about like how much salt you're using, because this little blue cup here, it's a small 12-ounce cup. Where you think about like a coffee cup size, that's enough salt to treat 10 sidewalk squares or about a 20-foot section of a normal driveway. A little bit goes a long way, and especially once you've already cleared off as much snow or ice as you can, kind of using that salt to just do the last bit of work. We have a little PSA video that I'm going to share. It's fun.
More isn't always better. More salt does not mean more melting. It takes only 1 teaspoon of road salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water. When melting ice, use about 1/3 of a 12-ounce coffee mug worth of salt for every 20 feet of a typical pathway. Once the salt has done its job, try to sweep it up and either reuse the salt or throw it away. More isn't always better.
Apply salt sparingly this winter to protect the quality of rivers and streams in Illinois.
So like I said, we, try to use and share information from others. And that was a great video that was put together by a community up in Minnesota. And they were happy to share it with us and allow us to use it here. And it really just sort of gets across the point that, it looks really silly to pour half a container of hand cream on your hand, but, that's exactly what we're doing when we dump out the amount of salt, that I'm sure all of you have seen walking into a store or in a parking lot. And so really thinking about, using the right amount. And then as we think about our community and being a good neighbor, many people know that, obviously if you have a fire hydrant on or near your property, then making sure that fire hydrant is cleared in case of, during emergency situations so they're easy to find. But also thinking about shoveling sidewalks. In most communities, if you have a sidewalk in front of your house, it is your responsibility to shovel it. Thinking about when we're shoveling driveways, it's always very frustrating when you get your driveway all shoveled and then the plow comes by and pushes snow back into your driveway. Unfortunately, there's just no way around that. There's nothing the plows can do to push that snow somewhere else. So it's as frustrating as it may be. There's really not anything that the plow drivers can do, but we never want to push any of that snow back out into the roadway, because if the plows already come by, now you push snow out into the road and people drive on it, it's going to turn into an icy mess. Now you have this safety issue right out in front of your driveway, creating an unsafe condition, there in your neighborhood right at the end of your driveway. And nearly all communities that I've looked at all have ordinances, rules about not pushing snow back out into the roadway. And then something else and we're really trying to work on ways to bring more attention to the idea of making sure that when we have sidewalks shoveled, that the crosswalks themselves are also clear. So if the plows come through, do the road, and people do the sidewalks, the hardest part is at the corner. and I know especially for those folks who live on the corner, it's a really difficult thing to try to keep up with. But thinking about people with any kind of accessibility issue, or their ability to, whether they're in a wheelchair, using a walker or cane, or have any kind of gait instability, getting through those corners is really difficult. And so really thinking about, if we can keep those paths clear. I found this little cartoon the other day online, and just the idea of, when we clear spaces for anybody with special needs, we're clearing those spaces and everybody can use them. When we clear spaces and we're not thinking about folks with special needs, then there's definitely people who are not able to use them. And so really kind of thinking through that and how we can apply that in our own neighborhoods. And then, if you really have to go out, so I mean, this is one thing, as a commuter, like if there is an opportunity for you to work from home on a snow day, or be able to go in late, it's an opportunity for some, definitely not all. But if you have that opportunity and it's a snowstorm, stay home. The fewer cars on the road just make it easier for the plows to get their job done, get to those safer pavements. And so really thinking about, if you can stay home, stay home. But if you can't, then really think about the different ways to keep safe. You should never drive up too close to the plows, definitely never pass a plow, especially on the right. And we're talking about really big vehicles that weigh a lot and have blind spots and have big things that stick out the front and out the side sometimes. So really dangerous to try to pass a plow. And the road's going to be clear behind the plow anyway. But making sure that you're giving yourself enough time, because it's done, to drive slower and be more careful. But if you don't have to leave, then stay home and keep everybody else safe. Again, if you do have to leave, make sure you're prepared for the winter. I mean, there's many things that you can stick in the trunk and have ready for the winter. I'm just thinking about a blanket or a small shovel, an extra jacket or some gloves, so that if you do run into an emergency situation, that you're prepared for it. Again, thinking about the driving, the cruise control is one of the things they recommend not to use during winter conditions, that it can make it unsafe. The way your car accelerates when it's on cruise control, making sure you have enough distance. Again, giving the plows their space to do their work. And then, when you get to work and walking into the building, I mean, really thinking about, how do we stay safe as we walk, and think about using, wearing appropriate shoes, taking our time, especially if things look a little bit slick in different conditions. We collected a couple of different posters like this. Is one that Argonne had put together, just to kind of, make it a little bit fun, but how people really think about, this is part of your responsibility too, of when you're walking out during the winter, of, being prepared, taking your time, wearing appropriate footwear, etc. Some other ways that you can help with salt reduction efforts, that if you happen to be the one who's in charge of hiring the contractor for clearing snow, and maybe at your apartment building or your office building or work, we have a Salt Smart certified program, and we're working with contractors who are using these practices, and would love to sit down and talk to you about the benefits of hiring a Salt Smart contractor, and help hook you up with folks who are attending our trainings and certifications. We also have this really cool pop-up exhibit that we have been getting out there it's really geared towards residents. Lots of great information, a lot of the stuff we're talking about here tonight. It was developed by several libraries last year, and the Northwest Water Planning Alliance, that kind of deals with groundwater issues in Kane and McHenry County. But then they donated this whole display to us at the Conservation Foundation. So we have this to be able to share with communities. So whether at a library or a municipal center. So we still have some space available for this winter if folks are interested, if you happen to have any connections with a library or other public space. You can let them know about this and have them contact us and have it as sort of a checkout system. So yeah, it debuted last year at the Galborden Library in Elgin. So they did a nice event there with the mayor. So that was a lot of fun to be involved with. And then one of the other programs that we have for residents to get involved with is the Winter Chloride Watchers program, which Amy mentioned at the beginning. And I think we have a couple folks here who maybe have participated in some of the trainings that we've held so far. And so it's a volunteer monitoring program. We've partnered with Illinois River Watch, which is a part of the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center. And so the Conservation Foundation and River Watch are coordinating the program. We're coordinating it for the northeast portion kind of the state, and working here specifically in DuPage County. The DuPage County Stormwater Management is helping to support our time and to buy kits to get people involved in the monitoring program. We also got some support from Stockholm's restaurant out in Geneva, also to help with getting kits for folks out on the Fox River. So we're really happy for all the support from these organizations to bring this program out. We've had really great turnout so far. We've trained, we've trained nearly 90 people. We have over 60 people signed up for sites, which is great. We've had a lot of really great participation. We have one more training, a virtual training next Tuesday. I think that is 6th is on Tuesday. No, Wednesday, sorry. Next Wednesday evening. But it's a very simple training. Actually, a lot of the similar information we talked through here today as far as the kind of why we should care about chlorides. But then we go through the process of you collect your samples and you take some photos. You use an online app or you can upload information on your computer at home. But you take a reading, you fill out some information and upload it, and then that data is available for others to see. And so Riverwatch uses this Water Rangers website. Actually, I took this screenshot last year. So I think at the time there were like 35 participants up in this part of the state, and now we're up, I believe, over 90. So that's been really exciting. We're really close to 90. So hoping to keep that number growing. But it's really cool because when you enter your data in for your site, it shows up and everybody, it's available for everybody to see it. And if you do it year after year, the graph just keeps building. So you can really start looking at sort of trends at your location. And this information is going to help us just build a better picture of what the impact is that we're seeing on chloride. So we know, like we work through the watershed groups, we're collecting chloride data during the winter. So like that graph I showed you earlier, both the DuPage River Watershed Coalition and Lower DuPage River, DuPage River Salt Creek Work Group, Lower DuPage River Watershed Coalition, they have probes and they're sampling year round and looking at chloride levels, particularly in the winter on the main stem. So on the East Branch, on the West Branch, on Salt Creek, on the main stem DuPage, but we don't have a lot of good data on some of the smaller streams or in ponds or other places like that. And so being able to pull together more information is just going to help us guide more management activities and bring awareness. So really excited to have people participate in this program. Going through the training, spending the hour during training is like the biggest kind of chunk of time. After that, it's going out and collecting a sample. It takes about 10 minutes to collect the sample, take a picture, upload the information. So it's not a lot of time commitment. And we're just asking you to go out and do it once a month between now and May. So going and sampling once a month. could be on any day of the month. It doesn't have to be the same day of the month. You can pick a site that's close to home. We're working with a lot of park districts. We're working with the Forest Preserve District to help with kind of lining people up with sites. So if this is something you're interested in, you can register for it at the Conservation Foundation. Like I said, I think Amy was putting some links in the chat, but would love to have people continue to sign up and participate with our last training next week. So I also had mentioned some different outreach materials that we have at saltsmart.org. And so if you go to the SaltSmart page, at the top, there's a tab for outreach material resources, and there's outreach materials. And we have a lot of stuff available. So there's a lot of good information for residents, particularly with the blog posts and that and articles about the different practices or things like keeping your pets safe. It's one thing we really hadn't talked too much about, but salt getting into the between the pads and toes of your dogs can be really dangerous for them, or ingesting salt. So there's other even more reasons why we really want to look at how to minimize the amount of salt we're using. But we have a lot of great information that can be shared, and so these things could be shared through an HOA Facebook page or a municipal Facebook page. And so sharing this information with the community that you live in, that these resources are available, that'll help them, whatever the group is, whether it's an HOA or a municipality or a park district, be able to share good information with their residents or their users to help keep them safe. We have posters that could be put up. We have the one there on the left is specifically for an entryway where you'll see people put a bag of salt or something. We should never have just a bag of salt at an entryway, because then people are just going to put it out. It's just going to get put out, and they're not going to, without having a shovel or a broom available. The only option is to just put more salt. And if people either think they don't see enough salt, or they think it's slippery, they don't know that somebody just put salt 5 minutes earlier. So it's thinking about how do we minimize that excess salt being put down the doorway. That's where we're trying to put together information and actually really ask folks to not be a bag of salt or a bucket of salt at a doorway, but leave a broom or a shovel. And that's really what you want people to do. We have a lot of information about liquids and why liquids are good, and why the whole idea of love the lines, lose the crunch. We shouldn't be expecting or needing to be crunching across salt to think a surface is safe, because when we're using anti-icing, we're putting those stripes down, we're actually creating a safe surface without having all that crunch. And one of the newer poster we put together last year was we got this idea from, I think it was Romeoville, because they were having a lot of problems with on garbage day if it snowed, and people putting their garbage cans actually out into the street instead of leaving them on their driveways, or people parking after the snow bans. And that just makes their job more difficult as far as trying to plow the roads clear. So thinking about the ways that we can help our public works folks do their job more easily and faster by making sure we don't have cars parked or have garbage cans out. The roadways are clear so they can get their job done. Then we have a cute comic. We have bookmarks can be handed out. We have cups. So we have a lot of different things. We had actually done a previous webinar a few years ago. I have a lot more new information this time, so that was fun. Again, like the PSA and videos. So lots of great information out there to share with others in any way that you have opportunity to. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to reach out, and whether you email me directly, go through Amy, go through Raul at the county. We'd be happy to answer questions or help direct you to other resources if that's what you're looking for. So Amy, that's all I have.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. We will start to ask, but I actually have a couple questions. I wanted to go ahead and get us started. And then if anyone has other questions they'd like to add, please do that. So this brine thing is pretty new to me. I get like beet salt and all of that kind of thing. And I try to use not that much, but I've never attempted to do brine. So you're saying that, is on on the website that I put in the link, is there like a proportion that I would use? Like how much regular salt do I use for the warm water for a gallon,
Yep.
say?
So the video goes through all of that, and you can, and they give it both in sort of cups. It's about 3.5 cups, but what you're really looking for is about 2.3 pounds of salt. So if you have a kitchen scale, you can use that. That's helpful. But if you don't, 3.5 cups is going to get you pretty close for a gallon of warm water. And warm just helps it dissolve a little bit faster. I mean, if you use cool water, it's just going to take a little bit longer to dissolve. But then, and that's actually Hannah, and we did the video right in our office. So it's very easy to do in your kitchen or in your garage, however, and then use any kind of sprayer. The biggest thing with the sprayer is just making sure that you don't go and then use it on your plants without being, properly and well rinsed, or maybe you just dedicate a garden sprayer to just using brine. But it's a
Get a
real easy
Sharpie
way
and
to
put salt on it really big.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is if you have salt left over, or like you have brine left over, it could sit in that container all summer long. It ain't gonna break down. Still gonna have just as much salt in it next winter. So it's definitely something you can leave that way, or at least rinse out the sprayer parts of it so you don't have the salt kind of clogging things up in the sprayer over the summer. But it's a great way to get started. You can put it down before it snows. You can also use it to melt the snow or melt ice. So if you get to that point where you do have ice that has formed, you can take that sprayer and you can spray the ice, especially if it's not too thick. You can spray the ice with the brine, and it just gets started faster because it's already in that brine solution.
That's fascinating. I'm going to try it. I just think it sounds like a great idea to try to figure that out. And you already answered my other question, which was when would I apply it? And then I had another question. Sometimes we get calls from residents, apologies, that, they're walking around like a downtown area, or they're in a parking lot and they see just salt everywhere. Is there anything that residents can do to at least make the owners aware of it, or should they talk to the owner? Should they talk to the municipality? Does it kind of depend?
Well, I mean, so especially if you're like in a business district or on private property, like at a store or something like that, the municipality really there's nothing they can do about that. I mean, like complaining to them isn't necessarily going to change anything, I guess, is more of the thing. But yeah, I mean, letting folks know that, if you send them to our website, we have lots of great information. There's ways to keep people safe without having to put all that salt down. I mean, we work with a number of contractors. We put our training together this past year. We had a great committee of contractors who really believe in these practices. We have contractors that's all they use is liquids. They only use brine. They obviously plow, but they don't even buy, they buy salt to make their brine, but they don't put salt down. They don't apply salt at all. So contractors can make money doing these practices. Because that was the first pushback we got. Well, why would a contractor do that? They're worried about liability and making money. It's like, well, these practices can help them with both. So we have lots of resources for people if they're interested.
And I saw those awesome little blue cups that have not only is it the right size of the amount of salt, and it has a little diagram for how much salt should be sprinkled. How can people get one of those cups?
I mean, we have some at the office. If anybody's ever around in the Naperville area, they're welcome to stop by, and we have them at the office. And then we share them with our partners to hand out at different events and things like that. So many of the municipalities that we work with, that we have, particularly in the areas like, well, I work a lot in the lower DuPage and lower Des Plaines area. And so we work with all of those communities because they help to pay for buying the cups. But we also have cups available for communities in DuPage County. So we've got some partners, but I don't necessarily have a direct place other than coming out to our office to pick one up right now.
All right. And our office is located in South Naperville, and we can also have some available in other locations as well. So we can work with the different people in the county to make sure that happens. But our office is in South Naperville. So off of, let's see, we're actually technically in Will County, you could kind of throw a rock and be in DuPage County, but we're really close to it. So please, everyone's always welcome to visit us, even for more than just, getting an awesome little blue cup. I don't have any other questions, and I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I will say thank you to everyone for participating. Thank you for everyone for visiting and being a part of this. And thank you especially to Jennifer for sharing her amazing expertise. I always learn something every time I hear you talk. And thank you to DuPage County for sponsoring this webinar. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Thank
Take
you.
care.